Cool. So I gotta share my screen first. Over here, share. Why is this? Alrighty, folks. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name's Matt. We're going to be going through the Shell Trek tonight as a volunteer program that we're doing. It's an extension of our larger trail survey program. So tonight we're going to go through how to take part in the Trail Trek, what the PRISM is, what invasive species are, and why they're so important. And we'll learn about all of that along the way. So just a little bit of introduction about myself. I am the Terrestrial Invasive Species Outreach Coordinator for the Finger Lakes Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. It's a mouthful. That's why we shorten the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management to PRISM. So I work for the Finger Lakes PRISM. I am our primary terrestrial or land-based coordinator. So the PRISM is a collaboration between Hobart and Williamsburg colleges and the New York State DEC with the goal of advancing invasive species outreach, education, and management in the Finger Lakes region. So we cover 17 counties as part of our program area. You can see that in this map down here. We got Monroe County where I am right now. This is where Rochester is. We got Syracuse over here. Pretty much everything between Rochester and Syracuse, all the Finger Lakes, south of Lake Ontario, north of Pennsylvania. That's our neck of the woods. We are one of 8 regional PRISMs in New York State. So we have sister organizations that do work that's similar to us in other parts of the state. So if you go out towards Buffalo, you have the Western New York PRISM, you have the Adirondacks, you have the Adirondack PRISM, and so on and so forth. And we exist because invasive species are a huge problem. Worldwide, we're talking about one of the biggest ecological threats that we face. And invasive species is sort of a nebulous concept. A lot of people often debate about what it actually means for a species to be invasive. And fun fact, pretty much all of our ladybugs are actually invasive species, originally from Asia. We do have some native ladybug species, but they have pretty much been wiped out largely by these invasive ladybug species. So there's lots of different species of plants and animals and fungi, all kinds of different things that are around in our environment that you would be really surprised to learn are actually not originally from this area. And so when we're talking about invasive species, you could teach a college class on what it means for a species to be invasive. But for our purposes here tonight, when we're talking about invasive species, we're talking about any species that is non-native to an ecosystem and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. And generally, when we're talking about invasive species, there are sets of characteristics that invasive species share with each other. And these are, we're talking about species that are very far apart on the tree of life. We're talking about characteristics that, plants will share with insects, that insects are sharing with mammals and birds. And there's generally, when we're talking about invasive species, they share similar characteristics that make them successful. So invasive species, usually when we're speaking of invasive species, we're talking about species that have very high reproductive rates. So we're talking about species that, insects that can lay over 50 eggs. We're talking about certain plants like tree of heaven, for instance, who can set out 300,000 seeds. A single tree can set out 300,000 seeds in a year. So we're talking about species that could just spread really quickly. Species that are often very aggressive. So these are species that generally when they're interacting with other species do so in a very aggressive manner. We're talking about species that have no natural predators. So generally when we're talking about invasive species, there's nothing that's eating these things. There's no deer that are eating these plants. There's no predators that are going after the prey. And so generally this is because invasive species have what we call they're sort of like the potato chips of the natural world, so to speak. They have very low nutritional value. And so for the most part, native predators just avoid invasive species. And with nothing really eating them, their populations are just able to take off like crazy. And finally, invasive species, and this is a point that I don't think it's mentioned enough, invasive species are really good at taking advantage of human disturbance. And what I mean by that is that as we humans continue to change the global environment, as we build roads and highways, and as we build housing units and suburbs and more cities, and we keep expanding our footprint across the world, the new habitats that we end up creating are often places where invasive species tend to really thrive. The costs of invasive species upon their introduction are very widespread. So biologically, invasive species have directly contributed and are directly responsible for hundreds of species extinctions. Great example would be the golden toad over here. We're going extinct in Costa Rica in the 80s because of an invasive fungal disease. Invasive species are also responsible for not the extinction of, but the decline of thousands and thousands of species worldwide, particularly in isolated parts of the world. So in islands, places like Australia and Hawaii have been having huge problems with invasive species. And it's not just biological. In the United States alone, we annually spend $120 billion. That's 120 with a B every year controlling invasive species. So we're not just talking about an ecological problem. This is a huge economic problem. And oftentimes when it comes to invasive species, despite all of the damage they cause, despite how widespread they are globally, we have a really tough time finding where they are. Invasive species have a really good knack for being able to spread a lot faster than we are able to keep on top of. Generally, when we're talking about invasive species and how they spread throughout the landscape, there's a way we can sort of visualize that in sort of generally speaking, and that's what we call the invasion curve. And so what we're trying to do as both just sort of the end goal of my profession and what you guys are going to be ultimately responsible for tonight is trying to find invasive species at the early part of the invasion curve, right? So this is the invasion curve. This is how a species spreads over time. As we move from left to right, time increases, the amount of an area that an invasive species infests will increase, but the costs of removing that invasive species go up with the area that they take up, right? Which makes sense. As they take up a larger and larger area, the costs of removing them get higher and higher and higher. And so the problem is that we often don't end up finding invasive species and are able to do anything about it until they've infested an area that's so large and the costs of removing them are so high, we can't really ever hope of eradicating them. What we're hoping to do is find invasive species over here, right at the bottom of the graph, where the area they infested is small, they haven't really caused any havoc yet, which means the cost of completely eradicating them, completely removing them from our ecosystems and restoring balance to our ecosystems is still on the table. So what we're trying to do, trying to find invasive species when they're over here on the left, and we're trying to stop them from taking over and being too costly to remove on the right over here. So trail survey in general, and the trail trek is sort of a subsection of the trail survey, is basically just the goal of what I outlined just before. We're trying to find invasive species before they have a chance to take over. So our goal is to identify, survey for, and report invasive species throughout the Finger Lakes region, and anyone can participate with a smartphone or a tablet. So you don't need any sort of prior training or knowledge about invasive species. That's what tonight's for, training you on how to do that. And as to where it takes place, it is totally up to you as to where you want to participate as a volunteer. It could be any trail near you. It could be, when you're out in a park walking your dog. It could be in your backyard. It could, as long as you are out just looking for invasive species, that is a totally reasonable place to be looking for them. And if you always need suggestions about places where you might want to find certain invasive species, I'm always a resource for that. But just know that it's totally up to you as to where you can go and survey for invasive species. The way we collect data is that you guys are going to be asked to survey on any trail near you at least once during this month. So we're going to try to hope everyone here tonight who is trained in how to take part in the trail trek will be able to survey at least one trail before August 31st. That's the goal here. The reason as to why we're surveying trails is because areas that are frequently disturbed, that is areas that have lots of human presence, usually are the places where invasive species do really well, as I sort of alluded to before. And generally, we think trail sides are really good places to find invasive species because just like roadsides, just like places at the edges of your backyard or the edges of parking lots, these are places where invasive species do really well. It's often because the edges of forests have very different environmental conditions than what we find in the interior of the forest. So invasive species always tend to crowd around the trail sides. It's actually very rare that we find invasive species moving deep into the forest. So as part of the trail trek tonight, we're not asking you to go off trail. You don't need to bushwhack through the woods for us. You just need to hike along the trail side because that's where the invasive species really like. It's those conditions of warmer temperature, lower moisture, people clearing the trail. That's where invasive species really tend to thrive. And this picture actually does a really good job of demonstrating that. This is actually a trail, or what is supposed to be a trail. You can see right here, sort of in the center bottom of the screen, that the brown like patch through there, that's where the trail is supposed to be. But all of this invasive Japanese knotweed really come on the sides of these trails, and it's just completely taken over the area. And these are places where invasive species really tend to thrive. So there are 3 steps that we're going to go through tonight to arm you guys and equip you to be able to go out and take part in the trail trek. 1, we're going to learn how to identify invasive species. Then we're going to learn how to survey for invasive species. And finally, we're going to learn how to report invasive species. So those are the 3 steps we're going to be going through tonight. For identification, we will teach you. There's only 3 species we're talking about tonight. There is another part of our trail survey program called our Trail Masters. They learn over 20 invasive species. So you guys are getting the really easy part tonight because you only have to learn 3 invasive species that are pretty easy to ID. So we'll breeze through that pretty quickly. As part of surveying is really simple. All we're asking you to do is just note whenever you see one of our 3 target species with your phone on the trail. And like I said, you're free to survey wherever you like for as long as you like. So if you only want to go out on a trail for 5 minutes, that's totally fine. You want to go out on a trail for, 5 hours, be my guest. It's totally up to you as to where and how long you'd like to survey for, but it's pretty simple. If you see the species, just note it with your phone. That's all. No special protocols other than that. And no need to worry about doing the same trail as someone else tonight. We have quite a few volunteers who are taking part in this program, but our region is so big and frankly, it's so undersurveyed. The odds that you would be on the same trail as someone else who is taking part in this program and seeing the same species is quite low. So feel free to just pick any trail you'd like. And you might be thinking, well, does this even work? Like, okay, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna be like looking for invasive species, but like, what's the point? Like, why would this is real? Am I really gonna help with anything? I'm here to tell you, yes, it absolutely does work. So it's the first population of the invasive spotted lanternfly, which we'll be talking about in just a few seconds. In New York State, the first spotted lanternfly population that was found by just a normal volunteer who was able to find in Ithaca back in 2020. 12-year-old kid was able to discover invasive clams in a lake in Minnesota. And just speaking personally, this year, we've already had 2 major observations from volunteers already in our trail survey program. One I actually just found out about today. Someone found porcelain berry, which is not a species we'll be talking about tonight, but it is an emerging invasive species that is highly, highly invasive. And they just found the first population just as a volunteer by themselves in Syracuse, just while they were out hiking. So if you're wondering if this is going to make a difference, I personally find new populations of invasive species all the time. So just know that you will absolutely be making an impact by helping us find these different invasive species. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to talk about how to identify invasive species. Like I said before, we're only focusing on 3, so it should be pretty quick and dirty. So we're going to focus on 2 emerging invasive species. These are invasive species that are becoming more common in our landscape and we're trying to keep an eye on. Then we're going to cover 1 more established invasive species that's quite common in our landscape, but we're never going to really eradicate, but we just like to keep tabs on how their population is doing. For our emerging invasive species, we have purple loosestrife. And just so you know, I'm going to go through these slides pretty quick, but I will be sharing this PowerPoint with all of you after the presentation is over. So if there's anything that you need to check back on, like, well, how do I actually identify purple loosestrife? Does it have opposite or alternate leaves? You could always just check back with the PowerPoint on your own time. So just so you know. Purple loosestrife is a highly invasive plant that typically likes to grow in wetlands. If you have pretty much driven on any highway within the past couple weeks or so, you've probably seen its beautiful pink/purple flowers growing on roadsides. That's where purple loosestrife really likes to thrive. The way we can identify purple loosestrife is besides the flowers, which is going to be the main way you'll be identifying it. There's not really any other plants that have these tall vertical pink flowers like that. But other ways you can identify purple loosestrife are first of all, the leaves. Most plants have what we call an alternate leaf arrangement. That means if you imagine this is the stem and then these little boxes are leaves, every time you'll have a leaf on one end of a stem, it'll be on the right side and then there'll be nothing next to it. And then it'll have an alternating leaf further down the stem. Go right, left, kind of just alternating its way down. Purple loosestrife has what's called an opposite leaf arrangement, which means every time you have one leaf on one side of the stem right here, so you have one leaf on the right, it will always have a partner right next to it on the left. So the leaves will always be in pairs, working their way down the stem, as opposed to an alternate leaf arrangement where the leaves are always just by themselves. It's a really good way to tell purple loosestrife apart from other plants. Purple loosestrife also has, if you look at the color of the stem, the top of the stem will be green, but the bottom of purple loosestrife stems will actually be red or kind of like a brown or like rusty color. These three features, the purple flowers, the opposite leaves, and the stem being red at the base, are a really good way to tell purple loosestrife apart from other plants. Purple loosestrife is a problem because these guys really tend to crowd out native species. They will just expand and they will form these huge monocultures, which is when you just get a field of nothing but purple loosestrife, and they end up just completely eliminating all of the native plants around them. And like what we've been saying before, there are really no natural native predators that are feeding on purple loosestrife. So like deer really aren't going after this guy, and so it's just enabling its population to expand dramatically. Now we actually have introduced non-native beetles from Europe that feed on purple loosestrife in its native range over in Europe to North America. And they've done a pretty good job of keeping purple loosestrife's population down so far. But there are signs over the past few years that its population is starting to bounce back, which is why we're asking you guys to survey for this. Next, we're moving on to spotted lanternfly. This is the only animal we're going to be dealing with. Spotted lanternfly is a very scary invasive species, and it's something that I'm personally putting a lot of time into my work trying to spread the word about. Spotted lanternfly is an insect that's originally native to China, first found in Philadelphia in 2014. And in the 8 years it's been in North America, it is now spread to 12 states. This insect is a huge concern for us in the Finger Lakes because spotted lanternfly likes to feed on both grapevines and apple trees. And when you think about our agriculture in the Finger Lakes, those are our two main cash crops. And so spotted lanternfly is essentially an existential threat to our, especially our wineries. And we're really trying to keep an eye out for these guys, trying to prevent them from spreading. Spotted lanternfly populations have currently been found in both Broome County, so in the Binghamton area, and in Tompkins County in Ithaca. But the problem with spotted lanternfly is that they like to lay their eggs on cars, so they can spread pretty much anywhere in our region at any given time. When you're looking for spotted lanternfly, what you're going to be looking for here in August, they're either going to be what it looks like in this picture here at the bottom right. This is their nymph stage. This is basically a baby spotted lanternfly. They'll be black with white spots and they'll have these red stripes down them. They should be like that for maybe another week or so. And then they will then move to their adult stage towards the end of the month. Spotted lanternfly, when they become adults, they grow these big pink wings with black spots on them. Spotted lanternfly as an insect is pretty big. They're about 1 inch long, so like a little bit shorter than your thumb. These guys are really hard to miss and they're very easy to ID. So keep an eye out for spotted lanternfly while you're out on the trail. And actually they tend to do really well in urban areas too. So even just when you're out walking in your neighborhood, keep an eye out for spotted lanternfly. And just a note here, There's a lot of insects that people will tend to get confused spotted lanternfly for. It's important to remember here, spotted lanternfly is a true bug. So it's actually scientifically accurate to call it a bug. It's not a butterfly, it's not a moth. And so if you see something like in pictures here, like this butterfly in the top left with wings out open, spotted lanternfly doesn't have its wings like that. Its wings are always closed. It's always going to be pink with black spots on them. The wings will sort of be like its cousin, the cicada over here, where the wings are kind of closed against the back. But just make sure that when you do think, if you find spotted lanternfly, you're looking for something bright pink with black spots or red with white spots. So spots are going to really fit away, as opposed to most of our native lookalikes here, really other than this tiger moth. You know, the spots aren't even really right because it's got these like brown spots on it. You're gonna be looking for pink. Pink is going to be the main way you can tell spotted lanternfly. Finally, our established invasive species is autumn olive. Autumn olive is originally from Asia, brought over to North America as an ornamental plant, and it's really started to take over a lot of our open fields and spreads pretty aggressively on our landscape. Spotted lanternfly, autumn olive tends to grow as sort of a really large shrub, or maybe even debatably like a small tree. Main way you can identify autumn olive is actually pretty easy. The leaves are going to have all these little silver specks on them. And if you get a close-up of the leaves here, you can see this is the top of the leaf right here at the top left, the dark green coloration. All these thousands and thousands of little spots on this leaf. And even on the underside of this more like olive color here, you see thousands and thousands of little white flecks all over the leaves. Autumn olive is the only plant, both native and invasive, in our region that has these specks on its leaves, so it's really, really easy to tell apart. Autumn olive will be setting fruit sometime later this month. You'll get these bright red berries, but the berries will also have those white specks on them as well. So there's a few other invasive species that will have red berries, but those berries will usually be clear. Autumn olive's berries will usually have all these little flecks on them. That's the main way you can identify autumn olive. When we're thinking about impacts on autumn olive on our landscape, just like purple loosestrife, this is a species that spreads very aggressively. And so when we have open field ecosystems, autumn olive is able to move in and spread much faster. And it's able to actually crowd out a lot of our native tree species. Big problem with autumn olive is that as we see our fields moving from open fields eventually to forests, they actually grow so dense that they prevent our trees, like our little baby tree saplings, from regenerating, because they literally crowd them out. They prevent them from getting any light, any nutrients, any water. And so it's a really big problem that autumn olive is causing on our landscape. Just a picture again. If you ever have any problems with having to ID any of these invasive species, you can always use an app that I like to recommend called Seek. Now, Seek is not the app we'll be using to actually track the spread of invasive species, but this app just tells you what a species is just by pointing your camera at it. I actually used it on my ferret, and it correctly identified it as a European polecat. Don't use Seek as, again, to be tracking invasive species. This is more just something I can help you along as you learn how to identify these different species on our landscape. And if you keep taking points, just so you know, you are eligible to win prizes. The top 2 point takers for the show track in August are eligible to receive a free laser cut map of the Finger Lakes. So this is a picture of what it looks like right here. The size of these maps is about 6 by 10 inches, but these can be altered upon request. So just to give you a little bit more motivation, as I know, helping the environment is a great motivation as it is, but to just give you a little bit of extra nudge, you are eligible to win one of these maps. You take a bunch of points. So go out there and take points. Now, that's pretty much everything in terms of surveying and identifying invasive species. Does anyone have any questions so far before we talk about how to use IMAP invasives? Any quick questions on how to ID anything? Or I can't see you right now, so if you do have any questions, feel free to just shout it out.
Hey, Matt, this is Deb.
Yes.
I put something in the chat, but can you go back to the picture of the leaves for the purple loosestrife?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. I mean, I agree with the opposite, but they actually almost look like there's 3 or 4 leaves coming from very close together.
It does kind
Is
of
that
look
correct?
Yeah, it looks like that in this picture. So when you actually look at it in the field, it will have opposite leaves. I think, like looking at this picture, I think there might be like another loosestrife behind it. And sometimes, the leaves aren't always exactly 2 by 2 by 2. Sometimes there'll be missing leaves. Sometimes there'll be an extra leaf thrown in. So it's not 100% a hard and fast rule, but generally, it is going to be opposite leaf arrangement. Hope that helps to clear it up. Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes.
Will you be sending the recording? Will you send put a link to the recording? Because I was in another meeting.
Oh, no, yeah. So I mentioned this at the very beginning.
Yeah,
I'm going to be sharing this recording after the presentation, probably sometime tomorrow.
So in other words, anyone that's registered, you have their email and you'll let them know.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
And loosestrife is all over. I'm in Tompkins County, all over the place.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is quite a widespread.
Cayuga Lake, when I take my kayak out there, it is, it's very pretty color purple, but
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful plant.
Doesn't belong here.
No, it does not. I believe I got just a couple more questions here. Lookalikes for purple loosestrife. So there's not really a lot of lookalikes for purple loosestrife. There's not really any other native or invasive flowers that are flowering the way that purple loosestrife is right now. So honestly, if you see those big, tall pink flowers, Kasia, if I'm pronouncing your name right there, odds are it's going to be purple loosestrife, especially if you're in a wetlands or if you're on looking along a roadside. It's going to be purple loosestrife. And then Kathy, for your question, you find spotted lanternfly, you want us to just document, kill it, or capture it. If you could try to capture it, if that is a possibility, please do so. I would love to see the specimens of it. And if you can kill it as well, I would try to do so too. But they can be kind of hard to actually catch. They're pretty quick. They like to jump away pretty fast. So I'm only asking you to document it, but if you feel the need to kill it or capture it, I wouldn't be against that. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Maggie.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I'm very familiar with Japanese knotweed, and I see it all the time when I'm driving. Would you want us to record something you can see from your car?
Yeah, so it would be kind of hard to record something while you're driving. Maybe if you're a passenger. There is a program currently in the works that is actually looking at identifying Japanese knotweed from roadsides. But if you want to identify any other invasive species that you might personally know about that we aren't talking about here tonight, by all means, feel free to do so. And if you do want to identify and report invasive species that you find along roadsides, I mean, as long as you're doing it safely, we'll take the data, but I'm not asking you to, do it while you're driving or to pull over to the side of the road or anything crazy like that.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if you were restricting it to trails or just anywhere. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's really anywhere that you find these species. But generally, the idea is that you would be going out on a trail. But, like if you want to go to your local park, if you have, a big piece of property and you have a bunch of purple loosestrife growing back there, that's total fair game to record there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
You can see lovely Japanese knotweed on Caldwell Road in Lisle. It's all over the place there, and some on Route 79 also. Yeah, it's one of our most common invasive species. It is actually growing into the foundation of my apartment building that I am in right now. So it's very widespread. There was a guy who came to the Native Plant Society in Ithaca a few years ago. He has a cookbook and he brought samples of invasive plants that he had cooked with. Japanese knotweed was one of those plants. Yes, Japanese knotweed is technically edible. If you're interested in eating Japanese knotweed, I would look into it on your own time. I've heard personally mixed things about it. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to answer Luke's question. Actually,
maybe Luke, I will get to your question, and Kasti, I will get to yours as well at the end of the presentation. Just for the sake of time, I want to make sure that I'm not keeping anyone late tonight. So you guys just hold those thoughts for now. I will answer those when I can. But otherwise, unless anyone has any really pressing questions, we're going to go and talk about IMAP invasives. Jump right in. So IMAP invasives is part of the New York. Oh, we got a question right here. Oh, okay, great, thumbs up. IMAP invasives is part of the New York Natural Heritage Program, which is a collaboration between the DEC and my alma mater, SUNY ESF. Main goal of IMAP invasives is to fill in. Oh, here we go. Main goal of IMAP invasives is to fill in data gaps for invasive species distribution. So this is a great example of what we're looking at here. So this is the known distribution of tree of heaven, which is an invasive species. All of these red squares represent areas where tree of heaven has been found. You can see we're looking here in New York, and we have these huge gaps, between Syracuse and Albany, down here in the southern tier. And what we're trying to figure out, the main goal with IMAP invasives is, are these areas places where tree of heaven hasn't colonized, or are these areas where tree of heaven is found, but no one's recorded it yet? And that's what we're really trying to question. The core question of being part of the trail trek is, where are these invasive species, and are there gaps in our data because they're not there, or maybe just because we haven't found them yet? IMAP invasives is the main data source that's used for invasive species management, basically by all the main conservation players in New York State. So it's what all the prisms use, like the Finger Lakes PRISM. It's what a lot of our great universities, so like RIT, SUNY ESF, Siena College, University of Albany use. Adirondack Mountain Club uses this, the Nature Conservancy, New York State Parks, New York State DEC, all of the big conservation players are using IMAP invasives. So the points that you guys are going to be entering tonight, it's not just points that you're going to be able to see. It's not just points that I'm going to be able to see. It's when, New York State DOT is deciding when to get rid of purple loosestrife along a roadside, right along like the thruway or something. If you take points along the thruway, which I'm not, encouraging, because this is the trail trek, but if you were to take points along the thruway, they're going to use your data as part of their decision, how they're going to spend money. So just so you know, this is being used. This is the official tool, and there's a lot of big players behind this. So in terms of setting up the app, there's three steps that we need to go through in terms of using IMAP invasives. First, we're going to set up the account and the app, which hopefully you've done by now. 2, we're going to learn how to record an invasive species. And then 3, we're going to upload those records to the IMAP database. So first, we're going to start out with setting up an account and the app. So IMAP invasives has both a mobile component and a desktop component. Most of your time with IMAP invasives is going to be on the mobile app, but we are going to start with the desktop app for now in terms of setting up an account. So if you haven't already, please go on your computers to the IMAP invasives website. And I have this link right here. I will drop this in the chat so it'll be easier for everyone to use. And as long as you're using Google Chrome, Firefox, or Safari, you can use the desktop app. And we're just going to go through this pretty quick. Hopefully you should have already made an account, but if you maybe struggled with it or you didn't have time, this is your chance now to do so. So if you just follow that link I sent at newyorkimapinvasives.org, you'll be sent to this website, and just follow along as we sort of go through how to set up an account. When you go to this website, you're going to click this green button at the top right. This is login. And it's all your typical boilerplate stuff with setting up an account. If you've already created your IMAP invasives account, you can just log in with your email and your password at the top. But if you haven't, you can create an account right here. So just entering your first, last name, email, password, and then your jurisdiction is going to be New York State. I'm just going to give people a few seconds if you haven't been able to do so already. See a question here while we give people a second. Barbara, if you don't have a cell phone, we can try to work something out for you to take part. If you have a tablet, you can also use IMAP invasives on that. But otherwise, we'll talk to me after the presentation. We could.
Okay, I don't have a tablet. I have a laptop.
Okay, then we will cross that bridge at the end of the presentation, if you don't mind.
Okay, I will. That's fine. Okay.
Great. So I made an account already. It's now your time. I'm just going to keep moving forward. And again, if I'm going a little too fast, just we can always go back to this at the end of the presentation. So I just want to make sure that we're moving along here. Well, once you hit join and you log into your IMAP Invasives account, it's going to say IMAP Invasives has been updated. You can just check this little box says don't show in the future. It's going to say that every time you log in. Otherwise, you're just going to hit OK. This is the main IMAP Invasives online tool. It's actually really cool. I encourage you to play around with it at your own time. There's lots of different stuff you can do. So main menu, navigation, action tools, all this different stuff. What we're concerned about right here, right now, is the main menu. So if you see this leaf at the top left, there's a little circle with 3 little lines. I want you to click on that. And if you've already made your account, please follow along, because this is something that you need to do as well. If you already made your account and downloaded the app, once you get here, you're going to be drop down menu. You're going to see projects. You're going to click on projects. And then you're going to be brought to this screen. What you're going to do here is in this little search bar right here, you're going to type in Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. And then there should be, this is from an old slide from a different survey that we run during the winter, but you can see Finger Lakes some Volunteer Trail Survey pop up down here. You're going to click on that link. Once you do so, you're going to be brought to this page, and this is the correct text right here, Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. Top right of the screen, you are going to hit request to join project. Now, joining the project is a super important part of taking part in the trail survey, because the thing is, there are thousands of people who are using IMAP invasives every day, all across New York State. And so it gets really confusing when you have hundreds and hundreds of points all at once that you're looking at. And if I want to look at just the points that you guys are taking as part of the trail trek, I'm not going to be able to sort out your information from everybody else's unless you join the project. When you join the project, it puts all of your data in the same Excel spreadsheet. So it saves me a lot of time. It saves me a lot of hassle if you join the project. So please, 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 please make sure that you request to join a project. Once you hit request to join a project, it should just say request sent. I then have to approve you to join the project, but you don't have to do anything else on the desktop once you've hit request to join project. That makes sense.
I have a quick question. Can you do that on the app as well, or do you have to do that on the desktop?
You have to do this on the desktop. This is
Okay.
the problem with IMAP. It's not the most intuitive, but you can only join projects on the desktop. So
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. So that's pretty much everything we're going to be doing on the actual desktop application. Everything we're going to be doing now is on the mobile app. The mobile app for IMAP Invasives, you can get on the App Store, you can get on Google Play. It works on pretty much any phone you could ever get. So you should have no problem getting that. I'm just going to breeze through this pretty quick. And again, if you have any questions, just stay on to the end of the presentation and I can walk you through any issues you might be having. So we've already just set up our account in our app. Now we're going to go through how actually, I'm sorry, we're still on this step because we have set up our account, but we have not set up our app, excuse me. So if everyone can just take out their phone right now, and we're just going to go through setting up the account on your phone. So the mobile app setup, when you first open IMAP Invasives, you should be met with this sort of blank green screen. In the very top left, you should see the 3 little horizontal lines. That's the main menu. You're going to click on that and you're going to go to preferences. If you're logging in for the first time, it might have you already just be logging in. Sometimes it depends on which version of IMAP Invasives you're using. So if you're just met with a login screen, I would just log in right now. But if you've already logged in before, or it just immediately took you to the screen, just go straight to preferences. Once you do so, the very top of that screen, you are going to see jurisdiction species list. You're going to set that to New York. You're going to enter in your username, you're going to enter in your password, and then you're going to hit right here, retrieve IMAP lists. Now, this is the way that the phone knows that you joined the volunteer trail survey. So even if you've already logged into your app before, I just go through this again, just enter in your username, your password, excuse me, and then just hit retrieve IMAP lists. A little loading screen, then it should say your IMAP invasive data was retrieved successfully, including your project, and you're going to hit OK. Now, the rest of your preferences, these are just optional things that you can have. So for one thing that you might want to do, for instance, you don't have to do this, but if you want, you can customize your species list. When you go to take a point, when you go to observe something in IMAP invasives, it's going to show you every invasive species in New York State, like literally hundreds, if not thousands of options to choose from. It's a lot to scroll through. So what you can do is you could set a custom species list and just have it be the 3 species we've talked about tonight, autumn olive, purple loosestrife, and spotted lanternfly, instead of having to scroll through everything. So if you want to do that, feel free. Otherwise, you can pretty much skip just everything else on this page. It's not really important. Only other thing you need to worry about right here at the bottom is your project. You just want to make sure that you set your default project to the Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. If it's not appearing, you might just want to try retrieve IMAP lists again. And if it still doesn't appear, it might just be because I haven't confirmed you yet, which is I'm going to do immediately after the presentation tonight. So you can just try tomorrow. Other things like organization, doesn't matter that you don't work for any environmental players. So that would be something that I would have to put in if I was taking a point. You don't have to worry about organization. Other than that, just make sure that you hit save at the very bottom. So it saves all of the progress that you have done so far. But once you've done that, you have officially set up the account on the desktop and you have set up the account on your phone. Any questions about any of that so far? Okay, great. Next, we are going to record an invasive species. We're going to take a practice point together. Now, what's really nice about IMAP is that you can actually record invasive species when you don't have cell service. So if you have no service and you are in the middle of nowhere, way on the deep on the Finger Lakes Trail somewhere, you could still use your phone and record invasive species you find, even though you don't have an internet connection. So how long we'll do just a little practice point here onto how to record invasive species. Let me just get this set up on my phone. So you're going to go top right and you're going to hit this green button that says add observation. A few things you need to do here. When you're taking a point, you don't have to do this now, but when you are taking a point, you're going to want to take a photo with your camera. If you have a custom species listed, you can certainly enable that as well. For the drop-down menu of species, you're just going to hit fake species. It should just be the first option that pops up. You're just going to put species detected. So you have the option with IMAP invasives of noting if you didn't find any invasive species. We don't really care. We're only really interested in where you're finding invasive species. So there's always just put species detected. You could pretty much skip past everything else here. So it'll have like a little map and it'll have your latitude and longitude. You could skip that. It's not really a big deal.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Sorry, when I click on species, mine says custom list, so it only has the ones that I made custom already. You want me to unclick the custom to get the fake? Because fake is
if you've already have your custom species list, just deselect custom species list and it should just show you everything.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem. The only other thing that you really need to worry about here is the IMAP 3 project. Again, please make sure that every single time you're taking a point, you are putting in Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. Might not work this first time tonight, but please be sure to do so in the future. Again, I will have no idea if you are taking points and volunteering with us if you don't do this. So please, 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 please make sure that you're putting that in. Organization, time search, it's not really important. It's going to ask you some other questions, the size of the area containing that invasive species, the distribution of that invasive species. That's important information to add in as well. Please do so if you are able to. Don't have to do so right now though, since we're just practicing. And at the very bottom, you can always add in extra comments about something you've seen. Maybe you saw some autumn olive on top of a cliff wildlife. You just want to know, in an inaccessible spot, maybe you found a spider lanternfly, but it was already dead. You don't have to add in any comments. It's just if you feel that there's anything we need to know about that invasive species at that site, feel free to enter it in. Other than that, you're just going to hit save at the very bottom. And that's it. How you record an invasive species with IMAP invasives. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Now we're just going to go through how to upload those records to IMAP. So the actual uploading of records to IMAP invasives takes place on your own accord. So basically, when you make a point, that point sits on your phone until you then manually upload it to the IMAP database. It's not done on its own. You have to do it manually. So once you've taken your point, you should see this yellow card on your green screen. That should say the species you observed. If you ever need to go back and you need to edit a point, maybe you put down the wrong species, maybe you want to change something, you can just hit that little pencil. That pencil will just take you back to your point. You can make those changes there. In terms of uploading a point, you're just going to check that little gray square. You're going to go back to that main menu in the top left. You're going to hit upload selected. It's going to ask you if you're sure. You're going to hit OK. Load a little bit, and then you should just be left with a blank green screen afterwards. Now, and just so you know, when you see this yellow card here, that record is on your device. It is not in the IMAP invasives database. That means that if I'm looking for your points, I won't be able to see them. So it's only it only leaves your phone when you manually upload it, and then you're left with that green screen again. So you always want to make sure, you go out hiking, you're looking for these species, you're making a bunch of records. When you go home, don't forget to upload those records to the database. That's pretty much it. That's the basics of having to use the mobile app. Just remember that good photos are essential. All the points that you guys are going to be taking in IMAP invasives are going to be double checked, mostly by myself. I am the one who confirms your points. So I say yes, John Doe actually did find purple loosestrife. So make sure that when you are taking pictures with your phone, that they are clear and not blurry. They are showing their focus, that they are close up, and that they're showing some sort of the planner, the animal, some key identifying features. So like purple loosestrife, get a picture of the flowers. Autumn olive, I don't need to see the whole autumn olive shrub from a distance. All I really need to see is just the leaf with those little specks on it. You can just show me a single leaf. I don't need to see, the whole landscape. As long as I see that identifying feature, you're good to go. That's pretty much it. You guys are all set and ready to go. You can start surveying as soon as you'd like. If you need help finding a location, please let me know. And if you have any questions about invasive species, about how to volunteer in the trail trek, about life in general, you can always email me at my email. That's gallo, Gallo, @hws.edu with any questions that you might have. Other than that, thank you guys. Thank you for all sitting here and listening to me rant about, invasive plants for just shy of an hour. I really appreciate you guys taking your time to be volunteers with us. It really means a lot that, you're actually interested in this and you're taking time to help make a difference. We have lots of different volunteer programs on land and at water throughout the year. You can find us at fingerlakesinvasives.org. Other than that, thank you so much.
Matt, I had a question in the chat. I joined